Very good. It should give you the countdown. Okay, perfect. Welcome everybody to this webinar on the future of, or rather the future, the state of quantitative text analysis in the age of large language models. My name is Alfredo Hernandez. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Vilnius with a Marie Curie project on fintech regulation. And today we have two really amazing speakers that are going to tell us a little bit about their work and their perspective on this issue of AI and what we would call traditional text analysis. First off, we have Dr. Serafin Martz from the University of Melbourne. She has done extensive work on political discourse. Before the University of Melbourne, she used to be affiliated with the University of Gothenburg and the Varieties of Democracy project. And now she leads a, and I need to pull this up exactly, but a Australian Research Council project called Words of Warning. And most of you that are already familiar with her work might also be aware of her new package, Qualmer, that she has co-authored with Ken Benoit. So we have, on the one hand, this academic perspective, and our second amazing speaker for today is Dr. Bertrand de Longueville. My apologies for butchering that pronunciation in French. And he is the head of the text mining unit and the AI Competency Center at the Joint Research Center in Brussels and ISPRA. And he also has a PhD in web mining from the Catholic University of Louvain. Bertrand has published extensively on policy applications of AI, specifically for the European Commission, and he is closely affiliated with the GPT at JRC initiative. So we will definitely hear a lot of super interesting perspectives on how AI and quantitative text analysis pipelines have been used and are being used, not just in an academic setting, but also in the policy world. And with that out of the way, welcome everybody. Thank you very much for signing up. After this webinar, I will share the recording on the FIRSA Projects YouTube channel. More of that in a bit. And before I let my guest speak for today. I'll just remind everyone a little bit of the program. So first, we're going to have some opening remarks by Seraphine. 10, 15 minutes. Take as much time as you need to tell us about, your work and your perspective. And then we're going to have an intervention by Bertrand, who will also give us his perspectives on this. Again, 10, 15 minutes, as much as you need. That will be followed by a moderated discussion and then by audience questions. So for those of you in the audience, if throughout this process, and I'm sure you will be very inspired by this, if you have any questions, please write them down and we will get back to them more towards the end. So with that out of the way, Seraphine, can you please tell us a little bit about your perspective on this question? Well, what role remains for the so-called traditional approaches to quantitative text analysis now that we live in the post-ChatGPT world?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. And yeah, I prepared a few slides. Let me just briefly share them with you. And I try to be brief so we have more time for questions and follow-up comments on what I wanted to present here a little. All right, so Alfredo already did a great job introducing myself, so I skipped that and jump straight away into this slide, which is basically just a quick refresher on what we had before we were using LLMs. So it typically started with having a rather huge collection of material, for example, political speeches, and then back then we would just chuck them all in one bag because those methods back then were not really able to make sense of word order. And this is also why it was called bag of words approaches. And then we had rather simple techniques and also a little more sophisticated ones. So what you see down here in this corner is the most simple example, a dictionary analysis, where we just tried to come up with a collection of meaningful keywords depending on the kind of concepts we were interested in, and then we simply counted frequencies in our material. It did get a little bit more sophisticated here. Topic modeling, for example, was a bit more advanced and also a bit more inductive, so to say. And then we had word embeddings, and they basically paved the way to the transformer models and then also to the large language models, which we have nowadays. And here, just as a quick overview, why we are using LLMs. LLMs are really strong with context. This is the difference maker. The methods before really struggled with context, and these LLMs are able to actually capture context in our material. So this bag of words approach is not needed any longer because LLMs can make sense of word order. Another advantage is that for those traditional methods, for those supervised text data methods, for example, you would typically need a quite good collection of training data, and this typically took quite some time to prepare. And for LLMs, you can also use them with so-called zero-shot prompting, which is basically the idea of just giving the instruction without any further examples or training data, and you still get a quite good response. Yeah, and maybe one thing to mention, and we can discuss this further later on, is reproducibility. That's a challenge for LLMs. So we probably all have experienced this by now. You can give in a prompt, then you get a response. But if you then give in the exact same prompt again, the response you will get is slightly different. And this creates some problems, especially coming from the quantitative side. We typically like to have reproducibility, and the traditional methods were strong with this, but LLMs are still at maybe 90–95%, but there is some variation to deal with. Yeah, and I think although LLMs are really powerful and strong and have great capacity, it's important to keep in mind that they produce language and not the truth. So we as researchers still have to invest time to validate the output, to make sure that the LLM does what we wanted it to do. Yeah, and now to this question, which I find really interesting, whether we can chuck all those traditional text data methods out of the window and say, from now on, we will only use LLMs. And my response to this is no, because I think there is still some value in those traditional methods. And one point is what I already mentioned, this reproducibility, which is just more given, stronger for those traditional methods. For example, if we have such a dictionary analysis, we can run it again and again and again. It will give us the same results. And then there's also a few other important advantages if you compare it to LLMs. For example, with closed LLMs, these are those LLMs where you have to pay for, where you have to sign up for an API key. There are also privacy concerns. So if you are working with interview data, for example, you should not really use those models because you upload your data to some kind of server and basically give up control. You could still work with open source large language models, but then you might also consider those traditional methods as a valid alternative. Yeah, and yeah, here's also some summary. Prefer traditional methods when the construct is well defined, the corpus is huge, transparency is important, and you have a sensitive kind of data. All right, and here just a few examples where I think these traditional methods are really strong and will remain strong. I think this dictionary analysis is one example, but then topic modeling might be still something which makes sense in certain contexts, and word embeddings are also still quite powerful tools. And there's also some literature, and I think these methods will remain with us. And my take on this is that we especially can use them and take the best out of both of them in combination with each other. So I think using those traditional methods to kind of cross-validate the LLM outputs, for example, is one way forward, because as I mentioned before, validating LLMs and validating the output of LLMs is so important and so crucial. And you can do that manually, but you can do that also in combination with those traditional methods. And that's where I really see the opportunity of keeping those traditional methods with us. All right, and just to make this a little more clear, I have here an illustrative example. And then we can also further discuss this later on. So just very quickly, I would like to run you through this replication exercise. This is a study which I published together with Carsten Schneider in 2020. And back then we had this corpus of nearly 5,000 speeches. We were quite proud back then because we were thinking this is a huge amount of speeches. It's actually nowadays just a very small amount. But what we did back then was a dictionary analysis. And it took me quite some time to come up with those dictionary terms back then. It was quite qualitative as well to identify these important keywords based on which we then counted frequencies. So that was some effort, some time needed here. And what we now do here, just very briefly in a few minutes, is that we use LLMs to replicate this analysis. And we do this with the Qualma package. Alfredo already mentioned this is a package I developed together with Ken Benoit. And it has this philosophy of providing a comprehensive, sound and solid workflow based on which you can use LLMs in a way that's also generating credibility and soundness. So it's not just some arbitrary LLM factoring in your research design, but it's embedded in the qualitative tradition of doing research to make sure that you provide a traceable workflow, which is also very transparent. So this is the idea behind it. And we basically propose these 5 functions or these 5 steps. And it's quite qualitative. So it always starts with defining a code book, then running the code book with LLMs, and you can use pretty much any LLM with the package. Then testing different models to come to the conclusion which model works best for your task. And then systematically comparing this different model outputs and also different models compared to human coded data. So you get this very informed decision which model is really outperforming the others and how does this compare to human coded data. And then the last step, which we also consider as an important step, is this QLM trail function. And this again is very much embedded in qualitative research, which says that we need an audit trail. If we cannot provide reproducibility or full reproducibility, one way out is to at least provide full transparency and full traceability. And this audit trail automatically creates a report for you, which specifies every single step you did throughout the analysis. So you don't have to invest much time in this. It's automatically created for you. And then it also automatically creates the data package for sharing with your colleagues if they would like to replicate your analysis. So this is what I'm using here to replicate our dictionary analysis. And here now just a quick illustration how this looks like. I mentioned the first step is the codebook. And this is now a very short example. The codebook can be much longer, much more detailed. But even this quick example here, you will see later on, works quite well. So we just basically define here the concepts. We were interested in how illiberal or how liberal political leaders talk. And this is what we define here, what we instruct in the codebook. And then we also specify a scale from -10 to +10. So this is the codebook, and the codebook is very flexible. The schema in the codebook provides you with lots of options. So what you just saw was a very simple example, but that can be much more comprehensive. It can go over 10 pages. Whatever you need for your specific research question is something you can plug in here in the codebook. And then you run the code with this function QLM code. And here we are using an OpenAI model, but as said before, you can use here quite a lot of different models, be it closed or open source. And then you replicate. And here this idea is that you use a different model, you use different settings of the models just to make sure or to illustrate how reliable your results are across different models and across different settings. And this is then also something which you can systematically assess. You might know this Krippendorf alpha, for example, is something we have used before we had LLMs to assess the overlap between different human-coded data sets. Then we also have those measures if you have gold standard data, such as how accurate, how precise, how close the LLM output comes to this gold standard data, and so on. Yeah, and then the last step is to create this audit trail. As I mentioned, this will create the entire replication package automatically for you, so you can directly share the data and then also a quite comprehensive report specifying each and every step in your analysis. Now I'm nearly at the end, but now it's of course very interesting how the results look like if we compare those two methods. And I think I can enlarge this a little. I hope you can see it at least a little. What we have here are all the names of the speakers in our data set back then. And you can see we had some typical Democrats, but then also some fully fledged autocrats. Here Kim Jong-un from North Korea and Vladimir Putin and so on. And as I said before, we were interested to see how illiberal or liberal Democrats and autocrats talk. And the main finding back then with our dictionary analysis, and these are the round dots you can see here, that these are the dictionary analysis results. And the main finding back then was that we were able already back then, as for example, Hungary still counted as a democracy, our analysis already illustrated that Viktor Orban talks really very illiberal. And if we now compare this with the LLM results, we see it's a little bit different, and this might be something we can improve with a more detailed code book, but overall the results are surprisingly similar because they both pick up this main finding and this main tendency that authoritarian leaders talk illiberal and democratic leaders talk liberal. And yeah, so we can come to the conclusion that while LLMs are very powerful and while they can help us to make such analysis basically in no time, I think a dictionary, a classic dictionary analysis still has value here, and be it just for a tool to cross-validate the LLM outputs, or also as a tool which provides more transparency and full reproducibility. All right, I leave it here. And I look forward to discuss this further later on.
Thank you very much, Seraphine. And just a reminder to the audience, if you have some questions that come up, throughout these interventions, please write them down and we will get back to them. So with that, Bertrand, would you like to take the microphone?
Yes, great pleasure. Can you hear me loud and clear?
Perfectly.
Perfect. Amazing. Now I will try to share the screen, and if I manage those two steps without a glitch, then we can already celebrate a successful seminar. But I will also try to say something interesting that's even better. Good, good. So you see my screen full screen, right? Okay, okay. So, what I'm about to say complements very nicely what Serafin just said. I think Qualmer is really an illustration of those two those two dimensions about LLM from one side and traditional what we call natural language processing from the other. And indeed, spoiler alert, I will also give a yes but answer to that question. Is it the end of NLP? Because all of a sudden we have those eloquent language models at disposal. Um, a word on the organization I belong to. Indeed, Alfredo, you say that we have a policy perspective. It's not by chance. It's because the Joint Research Center is integral part of the European Commission, and our mission is really to bring scientific knowledge into EU policy. So unsurprisingly, I work in the digital policy areas, and our work is directly relevant to the AI Act design and enforcement, as well as Digital Services Act, for example, for those who know it. And indeed, my research area has moved from pure NLP to trustworthy AI recently, and I think this is really the topic that is a bit underlying also in my commentary, as you will see. Um, we have really, let's say, the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and we are really eating our own pudding in GRC because we develop generative AI solution and large language models based solutions for natural language processing and not only. So if you want to know more about that recent story, this is the paper to look at. So it's more a commentary here. I will not get into a scientific outcomes, and I think that again it was a good complementarity because Serafino really showed concretely what we talk about. And here I will maybe more zoom out and see what it means for natural language processing. So this is the outline. What so what know what. Um, so on the significance of this ChatGPT revolution on natural language processing, yes, indeed, one of the things that we hear when we are looking at quantitative analysis with large language model is non-deterministic models to infer hard data. Is this a really good idea? But it's true that although it's non-deterministic, there is a way to control a bit the stochastic elements. And again, I think Qualmer's illustration showed that you can get reliable, I would say, hard numbers out of LLM. Still, it's good to know that mainly large language models are eloquent stochastic parrots, right? They are there to align one word around the others, and there's a lot of reasoning flows that are embedded in that technology. And I would also add alignment flows in the sense that those models are not neutral as can be a weather forecast predictions, which of course has no emotional tie, to the weather that will happen tomorrow. It doesn't care about your garden party when saying that there will be thunderstorms tomorrow. But LLMs don't have sentiment either, but they've been aligned to according to some views and values, which is the ones of those who align them. We may come back to that in the discussion. So when we talk about large language models, first of all, they've been increasingly large in the recent years. Also a comment because we are among scientists that we are a bit at a turning point probably where the race for ever bigger models that lasted, I would say, from BERT to GPT-4 generation has now led to something a bit more, let's say, unpredictable, with maybe LLMs being a bit plateauing, or maybe not. You see the mythos hype, and also, as I would argue, maybe the real interesting things are now happening around the model and not inside the model. The models are impressive and good, but the difference is now happening around it, and it's what is about agentic AI, basically. So I found that quote from about 10 years ago, about the fact that they were already saying that, okay, everything is changing, and probably yes, we are completely rediscovering the technology. It was before the transformers, so that's interesting. And indeed, the pace of novelty has always looked impressive. Let's not forget that. But probably now the piece of improvement, at least with this big hype around LLMs the last years, has been scaling up at a very impressive stage. So that's about this self-claim about LLMs are a revolution, right? But now let's look more precisely and accurately about what does it change for natural language processing. I think most of us are kind of falling into that reasoning bias that no, we already know we need an LLM even before knowing what exactly we need to do, right? And that's probably because indeed it's such a powerful tool in our text processing. Let's say toolbox that maybe it's the only one we think we do. And indeed it's a universal zero shot classifier and predictor, right? So for those who were active in natural language processing between 2018 and 2022, it was all about fine tuning your BERT model or your Roberta or your whatever, and all of a sudden, forget about that, just ask what you want, and the LLM will figure out. Well, is it that simple? In a way, yes. In a way, yes, because indeed, with zero shot, you get something super versatile. But there are other aspects to that story. First of all, inference costs as well. In the Joint Research Center, we process really large numbers, in hundreds of thousands of news articles per day, for example, in the Europe Media Monitor. And there, when you want to have a sentiment analyzer and a named entity recognizer, or this kind of classical knowledge extraction, I would say, modules running on that at that scale, you probably want to be cheap at inference, right? So that's very important. Now, again, as Serafin brilliantly illustrated, it doesn't change that, the LLM can be eloquent, but we are scientists, so we want to evaluate. And there, okay, it's different, but is it so different in the end? You see the Belgian touch here. That's I'm very proud of it. So a key argument here is the fact that yes, there we go again. We need to evaluate the outcome of our processes, be it from an LLM or from a rule-based system that was coded 50 years ago. It doesn't matter. You want to have the good old F scores and so on and so forth, and with all the problems of language and so on and so forth. So kind of let's say takeaways from this. No, what do I do with that? Well, first of all, what we observed, not only in natural language processing, but in the many use cases of LLM powered systems these days, is that a lot of misunderstandings are coming from the fact that we don't disentangle the three core abilities of an LLM. It talks, it has linguistic abilities, multilingual linguistic abilities that are super impressive. It knows, there is implicit knowledge in the model, and also recent, let's say, systems more agentic or with tool-based models can also fetch knowledge from elsewhere, and that's completely different, let's say, ability than simply saying eloquently that the sky is blue, right? It's find the scientific papers that prove that the sky is blue is what we need as well, and then it reasons, and that's very important. We see, for example, lawyers really always criticizing very heavily LLMs because for them a very clear, neat, and predictable reasoning is essential, and they often find that there are shortcomings on that. So it has common sense, huh? And indeed, if you ask for retrieving recent papers on that topic, it will infer that recent you mean maybe the last 3 years, and why not? It's a good idea, but that doesn't mean that it always reasons why. Also there, taking the example of Serafin, no? When you say, okay, find every occurrence of paternalism in that discourse, it will use its own reasoning to know what is paternalism. It has its own, let's say, conceptual semantic map embedded in the system, and maybe it doesn't understand the same way as you. So there is all these kind of complexities when using LLMs. So another thing I think is that indeed, when you have an LLM pipeline, sorry, an NLP pipeline, a natural language processing pipeline, you may, exactly as Serafin said as well, review where there is opportunity to use the power of LLMs and where you don't need it. Uh, I, I I may think that geocoding, geotagging is a solved task, but maybe not always. Well, for example, for disambiguation, maybe LLMs would be really good, and then you use them only when you get a Paris, Texas, geotagging, and you want to be sure it's really Paris, Texas, and not Paris, France, for example. These kind of things. So it's an example for event extraction, which is an example I like in NLP because it mixes, let's say, geospatial reasoning with linguistic reasoning, and it's also close to my PhD thesis. So it reminds me good memories. So again, designing your LLM pipelines, knowing this issue of knowledge and context window, very important in that aspect. Uh, and then, as we said, evaluate, 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 evaluate. I cannot say more. Nothing changes there. So, in conclusion, yes, it's the end of the world as we know it. A bit like Google Earth in 2020, in 2005, 20, more than 20 years ago, was a kind of the end of geography as we know it, and probably LLMs are the end of an LP as we know it. But I feel fine because, of course, the science and the good work around this doesn't disappear. So if you recognize the song, the reference in the title, you can also follow that link to let's say get the music, the bonus track afterwards. And with that, I have finished my commentary. Alfredo, back to you.
Thank you very much, Bertrand, for this intervention and also the Seraphine. So, now we're going to move on to a bit of an semi-structured discussion. So I'll start with some questions, but please, Bertrand, Seraphine, if you have also questions for each other, that would be absolutely fantastic. And I also see that we have some questions already from the audience. Please keep them coming in, and we will also integrate this as we move along. So, one of the themes to get the ball rolling that I've picked up has been the importance of validation and of reproducibility from the scientific point of view, right? So I was wondering if you could both tell us a bit some of the challenges that these black box instruments, particularly those that might rely on closed source APIs, bring to research pipelines, and what are some ways in which these challenges of validation and reproducibility might be overcome? How can we validate, perhaps for those that are not so familiar with the applications of NLP in research? What does validation look like? If you could tell us a little bit about this and what challenges you have faced in your own experience. whoever wants to take the.
Yeah, I can start with this one. Yeah, great question. Really important. And I think I also mentioned a little these challenges of validation already. And just to give you an example, I think what is different, especially if we are coming from these quantitative methods and Texas data where we were able to use for validation other Texas data methods, for example. So the input of or the effort of manual coding was not necessarily as high as it still needs to be for LLMs. So I think this is something which we have to keep in mind. These LLMs are really great and they were very capable and have lots of potential, and they do take a lot of work from our shoulders, but not all the work. And I think it's really important because we don't have this reproducibility, and it's so important to validate that we always keep some time aside to do those manual checks. So I think you really have to get into the data and manually check yourself, or if you have some research assistants, some humans need to check LLM outputs. And I think that's a challenge, but as long as you manage to integrate this in your research workflow, then I think you still are on a good side of having an effective validation strategy.
Yeah, maybe to complement that. First of all, it's true that in trustworthy AI, a keyword was until recently explainability, right? And then we kind of dropped explainability because it's not like in traditional machine learning where you could really see the features that were used in the regression to really take a decision. Here of course, with LLMs, explainability is not impossible, but really following the inner works of the LLMs, layer by layer for most text applications is not possible. So we need to position ourselves outside of the black box and indeed take measures to do it. I think one of the key issues, which is a nascent science, I would say, is uh, AI systems tend to complexify. That's why I say I tend to focus less and less on the LLM alone, but look at the LLM as as the carburetor, I would say, of a complex machinery, because a lot of elements that sometimes you don't even see if you use third-party tools are heavily influencing the outcome and can change from a day to another. So I think there also Serafin said it, using third-party AI tools can be a problem because they can change, for example, a security parameter or the system prompt, and you don't see it, and it changes completely the perspective. So that's why you probably need evaluation frameworks that evaluate not only once but regularly if the let's say the decision making process that is using the LLM is still fit for purpose. And there again, as in the traditional NLP, I think gold standards are gold, which means that you need always an evaluation framework that uses reference information, preferably human-made and very curated, to ensure that your process doesn't derive from the intended goal. So it's again easier when you talk about a geocoding task, for example, because there is one ground truth, right? It might be more complicated for the kind of interpretation of text, so political interpretation, but also sentiment analysis, values analysis, emotions detection, all these kind of things. It can be really, really tricky. So that's it. Yes, it's a brave new world, and new methodologies are needed.
Perfect. So going back a little bit on the issue of the changes that was brought, I want to reference one anecdote that I believe I read it in one of your papers, Bertrand, that just like in everyone, well, those of us that were alive at the time, remember where we were during 9/11. I think most of us remember wet we were doing or where we were when ChatGPT came out. Of course, this was a process that had been, let's say, come being put together for a very long time, but everyone that was not in that loop, it took us a little bit by storm. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how the now widespread reality of ChatGPT and LLMs more widely has shifted your perspective on what questions are possible to answer, how you think about conducting research at the design stage, and if this has changed at all, for better or for worse.
Maybe I can start and then Serafina to complement. Yeah, yes, I mean indeed, it's a pivotal moment and the technology has changed. Also for those who like me were old enough, it reminds when the internet came into our life. I knew life without internet and it was quite different. And I think there was a period in time where internet was still let's say a wild wild west, right? We didn't even know what it was meant for. We know it was changing the world, and then it only organized into the web 2.0 and some business models that we may regret afterwards. But my point here is that I think we are at the pivotal moment now with generative AI technologies in general. That the period 2022 2026 was rather immature, so we were exploring toying. And now with agentic AI, it will become more mature. And what I find important in that maturity for scientists again. Is the aspect that those large language models are aligned. They think within boundaries. They are things that they consider politically incorrect and things like that. And there is a real, especially for applications where you use LLMs in your political science analysis, there is a problem there because your tool is not neutral. So you see all the big stories around Grok and Elon Musk and redefining what is okay, what is not okay, moving. And I think this is a problem because if you want to use an LLM to detect, I don't know, detect sexism or racism, and then you use Elon Musk. I'm exaggerating, but Elon Musk technology, then nothing is racism because it's just okay to speak like that. So you see a bit the kind of issues that I want. So I think understanding better alignment and again this is an NLP task, yeah, because it's reinforcement learning by human feedback, yeah, that is made for aligning. But the I would say political effects of alignment in LLMs is something that is really tricky for NLP, especially in, I would say, softer applications, in the sense that you don't look at hard facts but at opinions, interpretations, sentiment, emotion, values, perceptions, and so on and so forth.
Thank you. Seraphine, would you like to also jump in on this?
Yeah, maybe just a few things which I can add here regarding this question of how my research workflows or how I do research, how that changed ever since we have LLMs. And here I think it's important to make this differentiation between using LLMs as research assistant tool, and this could be Claude Code, for example. And this is really great and very effective, but I also can say a few things about that. And then on the other side, what I presented just before is more like using LLMs as a research methodology because it's directly integrated in your research design. And I think your question, Alfredo, is more about the first, how it changed our research workflows when we use LLMs as research assistant tools. And at first sight, I was really stunned. I was amazed. Like everything, like I saved time, and time is so important for us as researchers. If we have more time, then we can do more stuff and we can get published better and so on. So at the first moment, I thought, okay, this is really a time saver. And I also thought it's great because I can go more at scale, like I can scale up, and I can scale up while having this nuance, this capacity of analyzing context, of accounting for context. So I was really first very amazed, but then at second sight, I also have to say, after now some time working with LLMs as research assistant tools, it also takes time to check what they propose and what they are doing with your workflows. And that can be really tricky because if you are using Claude Code, it's sometimes so tricky to spot if the tool is actually misleading you or proposing something which is not really what you wanted it to do. And that also takes time. So that is something you have to take into consideration. And then regarding this advantage of having now the option to go at scale, as I mentioned before, we still need to put in some human effort here. And this is also something which, yeah, put me down to earth again and thinking, okay, I still need the kind of time I needed before to do proper research. And then my last point is really that we should always keep in mind ethical considerations and privacy risks and also intellectual property, which we might leak to closed models and so on. And all these concerns are much bigger with closed large language models, so those where you have to pay for, those where you need to sign up for an API key. And that's why from the researcher side, I have this very clear call for more funding to invest in open source models so we get better, higher performing open source models which can compete with those very good closed models, because as researchers, I think our first choice should always be open source models, but sometimes it's just so tempting to go with the high performing closed models.
Absolutely. I fully agree. I also have used some LLMs in recent research, and I'm bumping exactly into these type of quandaries. But from my side, I will just pose one final question as part of this moderated discussion segment. Then we can move on to either questions that you have towards each other, which of course I more than encourage, and to questions from the audience. So from my side, I would like to ask you, from the perspective of junior researchers or junior policy analysts, or let's say individuals who are wanting to get into these fields, what would be your advice on the skills that they should work on and that they should be developing or working towards?
Yeah, maybe I can give the first shot, Serafine, and then um, for me, indeed, the kind of new ways of working with cloud code, or even better, open code, or really have this kind of next generation agents that run 24/7. Uh, it's really a must, I think, for young scientists, because it will really empower them, and I think this way of working is there to last. Now, the difficulty is to stay in control of the processes to know exactly, yeah, what you're doing, because indeed it's kind of for us, we have more seniority. I see my agents as kind of, a bit special, but extra workforce in my team. But I have been leading a team already. While for junior researchers, it's like, okay, you have data analysts, you have paper reviewers, you have technology watchers, and so on and so forth, working for you for free. But still, you need to learn how these processes work. So I think that's a challenge. But definitely, I would. And I guess it's maybe not the case, but I would definitely invest into having open code working for me, and starting saying, okay, what are the processes when I want to save time? And I think one of them is definitely uh, coding for data analysis. So not coding in the sense of software engineering, building softwares that works, but uh, having your own data analytics pipelines and routines. We really see that happening at scale in the Joint Research Center, where we promote actively the use of solutions like Cairo and also more ad hoc agentic coding and processing pipelines. Uh, this already every scientist in every discipline, because no, you cannot these days you cannot be scientist without handling data, right? So all the data and knowledge handling part of scientists is definitely related to that. The real issue is to remain really suspicious and skeptical about what they do. I think the worst that can happen, and it happens largely even to more experienced researchers, but that can be a career breaking thing, is if you rely naively on AI and you get really wrong conclusions based on that. The big example simply is the number of hallucinated references that are in very high level peer reviewed papers. There are news every now and then about that. The most prestigious conferences, they still have I think 8% or even 10 or more percent of hallucinated references. This is completely crazy. Now this is dystopian when we think about it, and you don't want that to happen to you. So use massively AI assistants, but don't trust them blindly. That is my advice.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, and I fully agree with this, Bertrand. I also think this is really important. And just to add to that, there is this term vibe coding flying around a lot, and I don't like it because I think vibe coding is using the tool blindly because it's so effective and it can help even people who have never programmed before to put up something nicely and very quickly as well. I would just say this is great and you can use it, but you should also then invest time checking what the tool is actually doing. And if you are not able to understand what the tool is doing, then there is some kind of problem also involved. And so if you are new to R or new to any kind of programming language, use the tools to get started, but don't stop learning. Don't leave it up to the tool to do all for you. And as Bertrand said, don't trust the tool. Always check the output, always check the tool, and remain skeptical. Um, uh, Leave your brain switched on.
That is excellent advice. I think in general in life. Okay, so then we can move. I'm leaving a bit of extra time because I see that we have some very great questions from our audience. Um, Before we move into that, would you have questions for each other or any points of discussion?
Yeah, I have a few questions, Bertrand. It's such a good opportunity. Like as academics, we usually are in our ivory tower, and so it's a nice opportunity to talk to you. And I would be interested in first of all, you mentioned this trustworthy AI, and I would be really interested in how you like what kind of tools are you using, what kind of workflows, pipelines are you using to make sure that you are dealing with trustworthy AI? And like this can be very consequential, I believe, on the level of the commission and so on. So I think this is a really important and crucial question. And then the other question is more yeah, me thinking how can we improve this AI landscape for us as researchers. So I was wondering what kind of ideas do you have or what kind of suggestions in terms of improving the field of open source LLMs?
Yeah. Trustworthy AI was an element of language that was introduced in commission policies at the same time as the let's say it was the inception of the AI Act, and I kept it, although the commission now talks more about sovereignty and this kind of thing, but I really like it because I think it really computes in our, brain and even in our heart. We want AI systems we can trust the same way that we want to work with people we can trust, right? But it's indeed very, very broad, which is not a bug. It's a feature, I would say, in the sense that you can embed into it as some elements of control and sovereignty, because as we said, we don't want an AI that is unpredictable, or that someone can switch off or completely change overnight, and then you cannot rely on it. But also an AI that doesn't cheat with you. That gets even a bit philosophical, but a recurring keyword when people refer to them discovering generative AI was bluffing, especially in the francophone world. It's always the word that came. Those technology, they are bluffing. But bluffing means also cheating, right? Lying to you, pretending, make you think something that doesn't exist. So I find it super interesting. Of course, concretely, you have things like indeed in the AI Act, the provision on super high risk use cases, so avoid that you commercialize systems that are deliberately addictive, or all these issues with yeah, using it in health, or in on the AI that determines social benefits and so on and so forth. But I think it's a nice mantra, no? We want to make AI trustworthy. About open source, I'm a big supporter of that. And I think open source is really key. It is also part of the very recent Commission's strategy on digital sovereignty. I was super happy that notion was kept in, because it's not only about yeah, copying or cheap imitations, like people want to say. There is a say that I hate, is that in technology, America innovates, China imitates, and Europe regulates. But this is really a way to a very simplified way to oppose and to defend the Silicon Valley's model. What we see is that indeed open source models are opening amazing opportunities, and we see that nowadays. But for the moment, they're all Chinese models, so their values are aligned to the Communist Chinese Party. This is a reality that we can measure in our labs, right? So it's not a problem if you want some Python codes to, clean your data, but it can be a problem, for example, for the kind of use cases that you have, Seraphine. So that's the point. So I really hope that not only models, open source European models will strive, and of course this is happening at a slow pace, and dispersion is always a problem here. But also more what is around. That's why, for example, open code versus cloud code is very important. And in open source, to ensure diversity and to avoid that one solution takes it all, what works is de facto or not de facto, or concrete standards. So open source ecosystems thrive on interoperability frameworks, and we see that with agentic AI. You have MCP, you have an LLM API for nowadays. We take it for granted. No, they all work with each other. We don't need to change your library because you change models. These kind of things happen a bit spontaneously, but can also be supported by public policies. So long story short, that's a bit the elements of answer. No, and vice versa, and then opening the floor to the crowd. But indeed, I worked in this kind of, and it's also a question in the chat, so we might continue on that. And this kind of interpretation of text use cases, like the one you said with political stance. It's also true for opinions, emotions, in a way, topics as well. Also, argumentation. I find all this amazing, but how can you, in your research, ensure that you neutralize the alignment issue of your LLMs? Do you have a I would say at least a hint on how to address that in our new ways of doing text mining?
You mean like if the model is biased?
Yes, yes. I prefer to talk about alignment because bias suggests, bad data, while LLMs have by design all the data possible, so they have bad and good text, right?
Yeah.
So yes, alignment. The fact that indeed your model cannot be racist because it has been trained for not being racist, but maybe what people calling racist was what you want to measure in your system. So you cannot measure racism with a model that is designed to ignore racism, for example.
Yeah, I mean, these are really interesting questions, and maybe like maybe this will also be like there will be more challenges in the future around this. But one thing we had in our recent paper, which is currently under review, and where we used fine-tuned bird models and then cross-validated the output with GPT 5.2, was it, I think, back then. And what we could detect was a systematic alignment issue or bias, however we want to call it, in GPT 5.2. And it was again the scale of we are still working on detecting illiberalism in language of political leaders. So again, it was the scale from 0 to 10, how illiberal a leader talks. And interestingly, the GPT 5.2 was systematically underrating the political speeches. And so this is something we are always trying to identify and then also to correct. And I think that's one way of dealing with this. A better way would be to have access to the training, to the pre-training of the models. We don't have that in the case of GPT 5.2. But again, this is why I think we need open source models. And this is also why by the end of this paper, we were actually able to illustrate that our fine-tuned BERT models were at times even outperforming GPT 5.2. So here we have much more capabilities and options to identify bias and then also correct for bias. And then by the end of it, we also have more transparency and higher performance. So again, an argument for open source, I guess.
Excellent. I'm happy to see this discussion. And since we are moving on to the questions from the audience, I see some that have already been answered, and there is an ongoing thread that I think touches a little bit on this, and it's a question by Kalima. I don't know if you would like to state it yourself, or if you would prefer that I read it.
Please read it for me. Thank you.
Okay, of course. Okay, so Kalima asks, how close are we to be able to measure reasoning and argument quality at scale using LLMs? Specifically, can current models reliably identify premises, conclusions, evidence, and a very long series of etc.? So I guess this is in the spirit of what are the current limitations of these approaches in terms of these highly contextualized questions?
Yeah, first of all, I think language models already, the transformer generation, are really a breakthrough for this kind of interpretations because indeed it is able to interpret fine-grained text. It's not only literal, so also the detection of irony and these kind of things are really a change. As we said, the issue is that we don't have a neutral tool to do that. So I think the approach should be probably here to consider these models or these systems overall that give you this kind of judgments, I would say, as 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 humans and indeed detect their alignment biases, their own political stance. Because I was about to say as a joke, Serafin, to your excellent answer to my question, but what about Grok detecting illiberalism? No, for him it's probably or maybe it will say it's illiberal, but I really like it. I don't know, but that's a bit the issue. And it's interesting because again, I would relate to let's say human social sciences. No, when we have annotators, for example, we try to have a small questionnaire to understand their own political alignment before they judge, for example, on some things that have a political value. But I find that it's overall it's really an opportunity, and we are, for example, specifically working. We have contributed to several. Um, shared task also with Professor Preslavnakov on political framing of an argument and also on precision techniques like rhetorical devices and it is amazing these things of course pre birth you wouldn't dream about that but as I said the science now has moved towards understanding what your LLM is able to, what is the political framing of your LLM, basically, which is a bit crazy when we think about it. Serafina, sorry, I saw afterwards you were about to say something. You unmuted, and then I started.
No worries. And I mean, I agree to all what you said. And just to add, I think it wasn't so long ago as we were still using GPT 3.5 or what was it? And back then the performance was really not as good. And I think that was a year ago, wasn't it? So in that 1 year, so much happened regarding the performance and the improvement of LLMs. And that's why I think this question, how capable they are and where the limitations are, that's constantly shifting. And we see new models coming out basically every day. And so I would say there is lots of potential. And that's why it's even more important for us to keep testing those models and also keep up to date on what they can do and at what point they overtake, right?
At one point, they overtake is the philosophical question, which I will refrain from asking, even though I'm very interested in your responses on this, so that we have time for more questions from the audience. I see that many have already been, addressed a bit. Is there anyone who would like to ask a question, perhaps, in their own voice? If not, we can scan a little bit the questions that we have here on Qualmer. So I don't know if you can just tell us a little bit about where they can read more about your work, because I think this is a question that has surfaced a bit. Also for Bertrand on JRC's methodology. There we go. So we have them here.
Yeah, I just shared the link again in the chat, and this link will bring you to the Qualmer website, and there you can also see workshops which we do. We just did one yesterday, we did one today. We frequently do those workshops. On Instat, you can also sign up for those workshops and do them in your own time. But just this website which we put together has already some free tutorials, examples, and so on. So I think this is already a great resource to get started and start working with Qualmer. And if you have any issues or problems, you can also always reach out. If you have suggestions for new features, please let us know. Ken and I, we are both very passionate about addressing those requests.
Excellent. And again, I will re-extend the opportunity for more questions from our audience. Let's see, we have.
Meanwhile, I have put some links in the chat. Both there were questions on weak signals detection and also on precision techniques detection. So if no one steps in, I keep bombarding with links. You're warned.
Perfect, don't worry. And well, I'll ask on behalf of everyone if you would be so kind as to share your presentations with us and any links so that I may circle them for everyone that has signed up. Okay, well, since there are no questions from the audience, I will abuse my position a little bit and ask the philosophical question that I promised I wouldn't. So, what do we have as researchers that LLMs, sophisticated as they may be, might not achieve? Or is there something that we have that in your expert opinion and in your experience working with LLMs, it is unlikely that LLMs will be able to do on their own? Is our own coherent worldview, our uniquely human attribute, or is it also fair game for these things? What do you think?
It's a really difficult question, and I think it takes much more time than a few minutes towards the end of a webinar. But I would say it's not so much what they cannot do, what we might be able to do, but it's more like what would we like to continue doing. And I think it's this thinking which we shouldn't give up. And at the point where we give up thinking, where we just leave it up to the tool, to make sense of things, of society, of crucial questions in our societies, then we yeah, step into quite risky fields, I would say. So I think it's more like what we would like to be in the future as human beings. And that requires thinking, and that requires that we as human beings identify and decide which research questions, for example, to work on in our research, and don't leave such crucial decisions up to the tools.
Yeah, I agree. It's somehow dangerous to ask some such philosophical questions at the end of a webinar because we might overflow quite substantially. But let's try to be concise. Um, I think, as I said, with this, it talks, it knows, and it reasons. I think that it reasons. We only start really grasping the reasoning power of LLMs. Know that they reason incredibly well, but the fact that they can reason tirelessly over and over and over and over again, when this, I would say, automated cognition will be embedded into systems that work, that will be a game changer for the entire yeah, human civilization in a way. Not that machines will take over and so on and so forth, but it's a kind of revolution equivalent to the invention of writing in a way, because that means that it's really delegating to an external devices things that before happened only in our brain, right? And I'm talking here about simply even basic reasoning, as we said, and we see it. That's why cloud code and software engineering is such a good use case for early applications of real agentic AI, is because software engineering is by definition a cognitive process that has been very well designed to be spread across different cognition machines, i.e., human coders, right? And have a common effect that has no limits, right? And I think this will be a bit the same for indeed handling knowledge and things like that. So we will have really to, I mean, it defies a bit imagination how we will position ourselves as humans. And I think we have a lot of dystopian narratives that we have been fed with because it's in the Western culture, that machines take over, the Matrix, all these kind of horrible things. But we need to find utopian ones, right? Where really cracking problems, processing data, collecting evidence, and all these kind of things are facilitated by machines, and then we use our free time to do what humans do best. So use human judgment, sympathy, empathy, humor, poetry, all these kind of things. So I'm a dreamer.
Well, with that, thank you for ending on such an optimistic note. I was kind of hoping to prompt that out from the experts on this. And well, just to wrap up, we've talked about some very, very important things today. For those of you that will be watching this recording later on, I will also post the links that we've mentioned along in the video. Thank you, Serafine and Bertrand, for sharing your work and for sharing your very valuable perspectives. And thank you to the audience for your questions and for your time. We've talked about all of these great challenges, but also great opportunities. And I think one of them, the things to keep in mind is that, well, it is important that we do not lose sight of the basic building blocks of not just what makes research design rigorous, transparency, valuable, and reproducible, but also the things that make us human. So thank you very much, and I will stop the recording now. Bye.
Thank you.